Good morning, everybody. This is Jordan Tremaine, and welcome to the Perspective Podcast, where we explore new thoughts, connect ideas, and offer perspectives that may change the way you think about a thing or two. And today, we're going to talk about nice versus good. So, I think this is an interesting concept in my mind, and I'm probably going to create some meaning out of thin air for some of the people that are listening to this in terms of how, in my mind, I define good and nice. But I'm here to share new ideas, and hopefully this gets your mind turning a little bit. But in terms of good, good has always, in my mind, been something that the majority of people want in their life, or they want to be, or they say certain things are good, or this or that tastes really good. But when I look into it, to try and find kind of useful meaning behind that word, I've run into a lot of difficulty, and I guess to try and say, in my experience, the word good kind of doesn't really have too much meaning because people tend to say it about things they like rather than something that actually does have meaning. Because when you're talking about stuff you like, everybody likes different stuff. So there's no consistent meaning to the word aside from whoever said it puts some subjective value on it. And that to me is very not helpful. So before I jump into what I think it's appropriate to kind of go over a little bit of the definition of good. And good is actually an adjective and it's a noun. And in its adjective form, the first definition of it is to be desired or approved of. And the second is having the qualities required for a particular role, which I look at as having merit. So if something has goodness, the extent to which it has goodness is the extent to which it has merit. And then as a noun, the word good is, as a first definition, that which is morally right or righteous, which I think is a huge rabbit hole because morals are very subjective. And two, benefit or advantage to someone or something. And I think that very harshly falls into what I said earlier about I like this, and so it is good. Etymology-wise, the word good comes from Old English or Middle English, and it basically is from the word God. And then there's other associated words in Old English like good thing, advantage, benefit, gift, welfare, virtue, ability. But I think it's interesting that this word good, that I hear at least English speakers in Southern California and also in Washington, places that I've lived, they use the word good regardless of their religious background, and I don't hear it connotated as a religious word, but etymology-wise, it comes from the word God, which I think would kind of flag it as a religious word. And for our other word, nice, because this episode is called Nice versus Good, nice actually surprised me a lot when I looked into that word. The current definition, when you search it on Google, it's an adjective, and the first definition is pleasant, agreeable, satisfactory, and the second definition is fine or subtle. But when you look into the etymology or the history of the word, nice comes from Latin, and I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of this, but from the Latin nescere, which means to not know, and then that kind of evolved into another Latin word, nescius, which means ignorant, and then it evolved further into Old French and Middle English to nice, which means stupid. And I was actually pretty surprised by this, but as I thought about it more, I think I wasn't super surprised, but I think it takes a little bit of thinking because nowadays I don't think the first connotation that we have with the word nice is stupid. But some other words inside of the etymology of the internet in concerning the word nice is coy, reserved, careless, clumsy, weak, poor, needy, simple, silly, foolish. And this is actually very interesting to me, to fall back on the first definition of nice, which is pleasant, agreeable, and satisfactory. I was kind of headed originally in a similar direction before I looked up the definition of nice to kind of ground myself. But when you look at that definition, agreeable, I think you can start associating that with being coy, with being simple, with being stupid. And not to call people names or be mean, but that kind of idea where an agreeable person may be gullible or coy. They may be somebody that is pleasant or somebody that is satisfactory. That's the definition is pleasant, agreeable, satisfactory. Satisfactory is like average. It's okay. It's not excellent. And there, I think you can kind of permutate that into simple, silly, foolish, that kind of thing. So that's really interesting to look at that. So we have these two words, nice, and we have this word, good. And in my mind, the reason why I associate these is because I've spent a lot of time thinking, trying to understand what is good. I think this is kind of a very basic, fundamental question in philosophy. And if you are interested in kind of figuring out how to navigate throughout the world, I think you want to figure out how to do it well or do it good. And so then you're like, okay, what is good? How do I do a good job if I want to do a job? I think that's a very natural kind of progression of thought, which is kind of where I fell into in my past. And so thinking of it and trying to listen to other people and say like, okay, what does it mean to be good? Trying to observe other people. Is good successful? Is good humble? Is good charitable? Like I'm trying to figure it out. And it's like this word is just so versatile. Kind of like the F word. But it didn't really seem to gain any traction in any specific meaning or any specific direction. And so I kind of was like, well, I think I'm going to try and, from everything that I can see and everything I can experience, try to distill all that down into something that that works, so that I can find kind of a pattern between all of my observations. And I think it still works with the definition once you get into it a little bit. But in a nutshell, I think that personally, what it means for something or someone to be good is the more good the person or the thing is, the more consistent it is. And normally goodness is a measure of a skill or a level of being. So you can be a good American, or you can be a good athlete. And like as a good American, I'm measuring my being. I am an American, but I'm a good American. And that to me, I'm consistently American. I'm not advocating for other nations against the interests of America on Tuesday, and then Wednesday I'm like, America, America, America. I'm pro-America every day. And not to say that I'm not trying to discuss my political views. I'm trying to give an example here. And then with the other one, good athlete, I would say you call someone a good athlete because every day they perform well. Not on some days they perform excellent and other days they do not perform. Which I know people are human and everybody has bad days and stuff, but on average, most of the time, when you say somebody's good at something, it's because they consistently perform at a level that's based on, I guess, how good they are. Because sometimes you're like, oh, he's kind of good. Oh, he's really good. He's very good. And so, like with the second definition of good, having the qualities required for a particular role, which I think of as merit, I think goodness is a measure of merit. It's a measure of, do you deserve to be labeled that way as an athlete. If you do deserve really harshly, if you have high merit in athleticism, then you're a good athlete. And yeah, so that's what I think of goodness. I couldn't think of any other thing that accurately kind of depicted everything that I've heard of. And even this is still kind of a rough guess. Words are not perfect. I'm not trying to force a word into being a panacea or a cure-all or something that can actually accurately describe anything. I'm saying this is the best I got so far. And I'm bringing this up because I think good is a really interesting word that has kind of these very well-known comparison words. There's good and bad, and good and evil. And I like the comparison word nice, where it helps me explain a lot of things in my mind. And I think sometimes when people ask me questions, it helps me illuminate ideas to use those two words as a comparison. Now, yes, I know earlier we described nice as pleasant, agreeable, satisfactory, and then historically stupid. In my experience, when I look at the word nice, and when I see people that are called nice, the quality that I see within them is a specific type of consistency, where I would say good is more the consistency of excellence. This is a good knife. That means it's really excellent at being a knife. This is a good athlete. This person is really excellent at being an athlete. This is nice. That's a nice person. I've thought about this a lot, and I think that the word nice, at least when I use it, it's more that it's good when conditions are favorable. So I would say a nice person when their life is comfortable and they are not struggling, they act very decently and they're polite and all these things. But I think that a nice person would be more at risk of not acting the way they do when their life is pleasant as opposed to when their life is unpleasant. And I would say a good person is a person that acts consistently no matter what situation they're in. And to this kind of like in my head brought up this like immediate kind of question to answer, because then we fall back on those other comparisons of like good and bad and good and evil, which I have more made up definitions for you guys. But in terms, we're going to start with good and nice. I think some kind of other comparisons to help ground this comparison is I would say a good person is like a thermostat. You like set the thermostat and it stays there. And even a thermostat is strong enough to change the temperature in a room, and it's strong enough to hold the temperature at that within a tolerance. And then I would say nice people are more like thermometers, where they kind of read the temperature of the room, but if the temperature of the room ever changes, the reading changes. And usually I think it's kind of consistent, so nice and good, they're kind of connected topics, but nice is not purely consistent because there's that inconsistency of it changing like with the weather or it changing with the temperature. I would say that nice changes based on circumstances, and good does not change based on circumstances. Good stays the same. Good is consistent. In terms of good and bad, which we're going to get into a lot of wordplay here. It's going to be fun. I still think good, throughout this whole thing, I still think good maintains the same quality, which is having the qualities required for a particular role. It's a measure of merit. And I think merit is very harshly connected to consistency. You cannot be inconsistent and worthy of merit. Those things I do not think are compatible in most cases. But in terms of good and bad, I would say that while nice is a very specific type of inconsistent where it's you change based on your circumstances, I would call bad a general type of inconsistent to where I cannot predict what is going to happen based on the situation. Like with a nice person, sometimes I can say when things don't go this person's way, they're not going to act how they do now, but they're going to act this way. And to an extent, I can plan and prepare and predict, even though I may not like it, what is the nice person going to do. As a person becomes, or as a thing becomes bad I would think is not consistent in a less predictable way. So like a car with a bad engine, I'm not sure when it's going to turn on and when it's not going to turn on. I'm not sure when it's going to have problems and when it's not going to have problems. And it's inconsistent and it's less predictable. And so it's not as good. A good engine, I turn it on and it works. Or, and this I think is very interesting, I turn it on and it never works. And it's not necessarily a good engine in that it's excellent, but it's good in that it's consistent. It's doing the same thing, so at least there's a pattern. Maybe there's a specific problem that I can fix and it'll move on. But good is about being consistent. I think in the natural form, it's being consistent in excellence. But I think you can look at that, like if you stand on your head and look at it from a different perspective, you can be excellent at not being good, which is still good because it's consistent. So, somebody that is a burglar and they're always burglarizing people's houses, they can be a good burglar even though what they're doing may not be what we think is virtuous or like worthy of merit and praise. But I mean, within the burglar world, maybe they're pulling off like crazy good burglaries, and so it has merit. But good is about consistency, not about morals. And bad is about inconsistency, not about morals. So you can call someone bad because they do good stuff, morally good stuff sometimes, and morally bad stuff other times, because that's not consistent and it's hard to predict what this person's going to do. I'd rather deal with someone who is consistently morally bad than someone who is inconsistently morally bad. Because someone that is consistent in something, I can predict, I can learn how to deal with them. But someone who is inconsistent, it's very difficult to understand what's happening or even figure out when this is going to happen or when that's going to happen. And that's very disconcerting, and it's I don't even know what that word means, so maybe that's not true, but I feel like that's an appropriate word. It makes you uneasy because you can't get a grip on what's happening. And then I think there's this third level, which is good versus evil. And bad, I think, is kind of an intermediate point between good and evil, to where good is predictable. Hopefully it's in terms of excellence and it's consistent. Bad is it's still in terms of excellence. It's still kind of defined in merit, but it's more connotated with inconsistency. Sometimes I'm this, sometimes I'm that. And it's not nice, because nice is very like, in this condition I act this way, in that condition I act that way. And so I help people when I have extra money, but I don't help people when I don't have extra money. That's nice. That's not good. Good is I help people when they need help. And then bad is I help people sometimes whether or not I have money, and I don't help people sometimes whether or not I have money. That's I mean, it's still agreeable that you help people at certain times, but it's inconsistent and it's not reliable. So the measure to which it is inconsistent is its badness, and the measure to which it is consistent is its goodness. So you can kind of, it's like one of those meters with a dial where I don't think anybody can be like 100% good or 100% bad, but like which way are you tipping the needle more? And then evil, I think, if your needle is going towards bad and then it like goes past bad, then I think it gets to evil. And evil is not inconsistent. Evil is something even less predictable than inconsistent. Evil is chaotic. Evil is random and completely non-predictable. And it can be good, or it can be bad, or it can be mediocre. It could be benign. I think that's a good word for in the middle. But I have no way of understanding the reason behind why things are happening. And that is the worst. I think the best example of this is the Joker in Batman, where he's evil and he's so hard to deal with because he's so unpredictable. And like, what is he going to do next? I don't know. How do I prepare for it? I don't know. And that is I think, hardest thing to deal with is chaos. And so to one side, good, which is funny how it comes from the word God, which I think is like, when you talk about God, he's the Alpha, the Omega. He's the thing that's everywhere. He was here before, he'll be here after. He knows everything. And in order to be that, I would think that you have to be like the definition of consistency, because you're always everything. And consistency has a lot to do with sustainability. It's not only that you're always everything, but you're always everything at all times. And so you're like this ultimate bedrock, this North Star of consistency. And that is the goodest good you can get. It's double plus good. And I think in terms of measuring good, sometimes we can talk a lot about stuff, but I mean, what does it mean if we don't have any tools to figure out if we are doing it or if we're not doing it? There is a test that I think is helpful, and it's kind of like a consistency litmus test, where if you want to know if a thing is good to do, and I'm going to talk about things to do, like actions, because I think like a good knife, that's pretty easy to test. You cut some stuff, and if it cuts all the things good, then it's a good knife. And if it's cutting this good but cutting that bad, then it's not a good knife. Or maybe it's only good for meat because it only cuts meat good, but it doesn't cut vegetables or whatever. And I think that's pretty easy to test. You can figure out tests for things, if a thing is good or bad. But for actions, that can be harder. And so I think a good kind of general test for an action to see if it's good or bad is ask yourself, for whatever action, if literally everybody did this, would things be okay? And if the answer is yes, then it's probably okay. And if the question gets a little further, and it's like, if everybody did this and they did it a lot, or they did it all the time, would things still be okay? And I think this is not a perfect test, but it can help you kind of get an intuition for what's good and what's not good. So, for instance, what if everybody took a bath? Would things still be okay? Would the society still be intact? I think so. And I think it might be good. People, they're clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness. I've heard that. That's funny. But it's a good hygiene practice. It makes you not smell, and it's nice to be around people that bathe. So what if people bathed all the time? I think things would be great if people bathed all the time. So I think the action of bathing is good. You should bathe. You should be a good bather. You should do it all the time, and you should take pride, and you should gain skill and be of high merit in bathing. Another example. Steal money from your neighbor. Is that good? Should I do that? What if everybody stole money from their neighbor? Now, this is kind of tricky, because you can have this thought, well, if everybody stole, then, nobody would really lose any money. But I'm not saying how much money they stole. I mean, you can get overly specific and you can kind of mess up the intention of the exercise. But if people are stealing all the time, would that be okay? And I don't think so, me personally. And if everybody was doing it all the time, I think it'd be even worse. And so I think that's not necessarily a good thing to do. And this is morally good. And this gets kind of confusing because there's different ways to look at the term good. You can look at it as consistent. You can look at it as merit-based, which is kind of the same thing. You can look at it as morally righteous, because that's one of the definitions. I think one of the very important things to note about words is that words mean more than one thing, and they can mean different things in different situations, and they can mean more than one thing in the same situation. And that's okay. That's fine. But I think the more that we know about the word, the more colors that we can paint the picture of the word with, the deeper our understanding and the greater our ability to navigate the world using these concepts that I'm calling words right now. And so we got good, bad, and evil. And then we got good versus nice. I think nice is a very special type of inconsistent that may seem good because usually in this situation this person gets mad, but in that situation this person is happy. It seems consistent because in this type of situation they're always mad, but in that type of situation they're always happy. But it's not good because inconsistent because they're switching their moods depending on the situation. They're a person, and I'm okay with you getting mad or you being happy or you being sad, but I think your morals and your values and your standards should remain constant throughout your life, no matter how hard your life gets or how easy your life gets. And when it's easy, yes, it's great, and it's easy to have high morals and standards, but when it's hard, there's this idea that, like, the real test of a person is what happens, how they act when they struggle. And I think that's like the measure of goodness. Can you maintain consistency in how you act when things are not favorable? And I think if you cannot maintain consistency in your morals, in your values and stuff when things get hard, then you're a nice person. And nice people aren't the worst people in the world. They're not evil people, but they're very dangerous people because they sway very easily. And if you set up the right situation, you can get them to act in ways that are not very good. So I wanted to explain this concept because I think that it's important, at least for me, to differentiate in my life who's a nice person and who's a good person. And I try to treat all people with respect and humanity because all people are humans and they deserve respect and to be treated like humans, no matter what they've done. But I try to also be careful with who I associate with because it can be bad for me and bad for the people around me if I bring someone that's nefarious into my group. So I try to keep a lookout for nice people, and I try much harder to seek out good people. And good people can be very rude, or good people can be very in your face about certain things. And it's typically because they believe something, and they'll become adamant about it when you're challenged, and they're not necessarily being like buttheads or something like that. But I think people that can put up boundaries, healthy boundaries, maintain healthy boundaries, have conversation, not get overly emotional when they get feedback and stuff like that, become stable people. They're good, and they're, in my opinion, the type of people you should seek out in your life. And people that are nice, the type of people who wildly vary depending on the situation being in their favor or not, those kind of people can lead you more into chaos rather than order. And that cannot, in a lot of cases, be not good for your mental health, for your emotional health, for even your physical health, and like the stability of your life. So a lot of concepts thrown around. I use good in a lot of different ways, and then I tried to use other words to describe what I was talking about, because I know typically people use good in a lot of ways, and I wanted to try and use good only in a couple of ways, and then other words when it was a concept that sometimes people use the word good for, but I'm trying to, like, push out meaning and have new ideas and all this stuff. So that was nice versus good. I think when somebody asks me questions, I'm better at explaining, like, in a conversation, but this is the podcast version of it. And I was actually really surprised by the etymology of the word nice. That was really interesting to me. And now that we're at the end of the podcast, I think it's the kind of word that's like, oh, yeah, she's really nice. But look a little closer at that word. Look a little closer at what you're trying to say. Is that a compliment? Is that a good thing? Is that something that's desirable? And it may have a pretty exterior, but is it something that has merit? Is it something that has consistency? Is it something that you can rely on? I'd rather have a beat-up truck that turns on every time than a really expensive car that doesn't start. And that's not to, I'm not trying to point fingers at any particular person or say certain people are a certain way. I'm saying that I think we should try our best to be good people and encourage other people to be good, and at the same time be mindful and be careful that not everybody is at a place in their life where they can be good with all things, and sometimes that can be bad for us, or not the best for us, to kind of stay away from using the word bad because I use it in a different way. So to be mindful of that so we can keep ourselves sane and also encourage others into goodness. So that was the Perspective episode on nice versus good. I have been, in other news, aside from this podcast, the workshops and the community discussions that I've been doing have been online since it's like quarantine time, and I think I'm going to continue that until the CDC says it's okay to go back in person. But I've been having a really good time with those, and those are being recorded, and you can catch those on my YouTube channel, which is super available through jordantremaine.com. And so you can find the podcast link there, but you probably already have it because you're listening to this. You can find the YouTube link, which has like all those events. The community discussions, I started a new type of community discussion. I still have the old one where we talk about concepts and we kind of get into philosophy. It's a packed philosophy and critical thinking one, but also I have been working with my good friend Michelle, and we started something called #Heard, and it's more pointed at creating community discussions that are about creating community and about social justice and about making realistic progress and not just, yeah, that sounds really good, let's go do that. Like, hold on. Is that good? Will that make a lasting change? And is that the change we want? And so it's about, speaking truth and hearing our struggle so we can be understood and be validated, but also trying to come together and make positive, lasting change that we can be proud of. So the information for all of those events are on the events page of jordantremaine.com. And I finally figured out that signing up for a Patreon doesn't put it in access for other people until you set it up and put links in places. So if you think that this kind of stuff is good and it deserves support, and you want to see more of it, I would say go to my page, scroll down the bottom, and there's a word called Patreon. Click on it, and please support me if you think this is good. I think we should support the people we think do good work, and we should not ask for discounts if our friend opens a small business and we believe in their work. We should support them, and we should buy their stuff if we think it's good. So if this provides value to you, I have come up with a way for you to show support, and if you can't afford it, no big deal. I still want you to listen, I still want you to share, I still want you to create conversation. But if you are so inclined, there is now a possible way to show support if you're so inclined. But yeah, I hope you guys have a nice week, and I really hope this concept of nice versus good is something that has value to you and something that can help you. This helps me explain things to other people sometimes when they're dealing with certain issues. So I really hope this is a good tool in your toolkit of concepts. But yeah, have a good one. Good night.